I'm Belvedere. Today's video is going to be a challenge for two reasons. So the first reason is because it is literally a challenge, and the second reason because it's going to be a challenge for me to complete the challenge. I'm hoping it won't be too much of a challenge, but we shall see at the end of this video. So Carolee from Carolee Cosplay suggested in our Facebook costume group about a one-day make challenge. I was kind of intrigued by this and decided it might be worth giving it a go. So that is what this video is going to be. When I first thought about doing this challenge, accepting this challenge, I guess you could call it, I was going to do something fairly easy, such as a simple skirt and then maybe alter a blouse that I have to make it a little more vintage style. But I got sidetracked on Pinterest. I went down a rabbit hole and I came out the other end with this idea to blend two different eras, specifically a Grace Kelly dress and a 18th century dress. I am calling this project Grace Kelly Meets the 18th Century. I am combining this dress that is in the Met Museum and Grace Kelly's dress that she wears in the movie Rear Window. So when that idea popped into my head, I kind of had to do it. I couldn't get it out of my head. So I sat down and I drew out a little sketch combining these two dresses, and before I knew it, I was drafting the blouse. So this is a one-day make, and I held myself back a little bit from getting started right on the fabric, but I did think it would be okay to draft the blouse and design the dress beforehand, because this will also give me a little bit of grace for this day that I'm trying to complete the dress. So just to eliminate some of the steps. So we shall see if this dress actually takes form all in one day. You shall find out in the end of this video. So what made me first think about this dress was the fact that I had some fabric in stock that I had got for a very good price that would work perfectly for this dress combination. I got this fabric at a thrift store and it was about $6 for 16 yards. So that was a steal. It is cotton and it's a really pretty sheer type cotton. So this will be the outer part of the dress, and I thought of this fabric because the print from the Grace Kelly dress looks very similar to this fabric, at least the print and such, at least in my opinion. And since I got it for so cheap, I decided why not make a random dress with it. So that's the main fabric. And then this is the fabric I plan to use for the underskirt type portion of the dress. So this fabric is mostly polyester, which is a little bit of a bummer because I would have loved to make this all natural dress, but I had it in stock and I got it for less than $2 a yard. And it really works pretty well with the outer fabric. Any of the other fabrics that would work with this style dress, like a sheer summery type fabric, they were all pure white. And since my outer fabric is more of a natural color, the white kind of clashed with it. So that is why I decided to pick this fabric, because it does have this nice linen look strip going throughout it, and it is partially linen. I think it's 2% linen and the rest is poly. So those are the fabrics I've chosen. As I mentioned, I already have the bodice draped, and that fits pretty well. I am pretty happy with the fit. I am going to go ahead and get it cut out of the real fabric and leave large seam allowances so that I can easily adjust anything that needs to be, but at the same time, I don't have to make a second draft or mock-up, whichever you want to call it. So that's about it for right now. We shall see how this day goes and how far I actually get on this dress. We shall see if it's an utter failure as far as the one-day make goes. If it is a failure in that regard, I will just continue making it until it's finished, and then this video will not be a one-day make. It is around 9 a.m. and that is when I'm gonna officially start. So we shall see how this goes. The first thing to do was to cut my draft apart so that I could have the flat pattern pieces. I then traced these pattern pieces on some pattern paper and made the small adjustments that I know I needed to make. Before going on to cutting out the fabric, I took a breakfast break, and while I was at it, did some research. This research also included watching Bernadette Banner's 18th century summer-inspired dress, which I will link and was definitely an inspiration for this project. I traced my pattern pieces onto my fabric. I did not include seam allowance on these pattern pieces because I knew I wanted to trace the sewing lines and then leave a very large seam allowance so I could adjust the pattern if needed. And now we're on to the sheer layer. Let me tell you, this process of finding the right pattern for the right place on the bodice was quite a challenge. There's a lot of dark print that I really didn't want too much on the bodice, and if it was gonna be on the bodice, I didn't want it in a weird, awkward place. So it took some time, but eventually I decided to cut this piece and the back piece on a bias. It isn't a complete 45-degree angle to the grain line, it's more of a 20-degree angle to the straight grain. So I did play around with this. I felt like it actually enhanced the fit of the bodice. Just having that bias stretch helped smooth the bodice back and front. And then also it really did help with the pattern matching and placement. I was able to get the lighter parts of the print and really exclude a lot of the darker print, which was the goal. So that was great. And then for the center front, I really had fun matching the pattern so that it was even on both sides. Here you can see I'm pointing out some of the parts that I tried to match. Now the weird thing with this fabric is there's no mirroring to it, if that makes sense. It's the same angle for all the prints across the whole thing. After this, I went on to cutting out my stiff cotton voile, which I am very glad I added. It added a nice strength layer to the bodice. Okay, so it's about 1:15, and I have all the fabric cut out, at least for the bodice. I haven't even started on the skirt yet, but all the bodice pieces are cut out. I was, of course, hoping to make a little more progress than just cut out the fabric, but there's a lot of layers to this bodice, which I was not anticipating, and, well, I kind of knew I was gonna do, but at the same time wasn't thinking about it. I don't know how that happened. But there's 4 layers of fabric in this. So 3 of them are going to be in the base bodice. So it's kind of like a strapless base bodice, and then the outer fashion fabric is going to be across it all and then continue up and create kind of the shoulder straps. So I wanted to do that because the rear window dress, you can see that it's more sheer up here and not down here. So that's why I decided to go that route. So I do have a inner facing type layer. This is a stiffened cotton voile that I got a while ago, and it didn't work for the project I got it for because I didn't know it was so stiff. But I decided to add a layer in this in the under bodice just to give a little more structure and hopefully reduce some wrinkles and such. So that was one layer of the under bodice. And then I have a cotton lawn for the lining. I am gonna do a conventional lining for this dress. I just decided, since it's just historically inspired, I'm not gonna go the historical route of interlining the lining. And then the under bodice is just a basic combed cotton fabric. So 3 layers basically in the under bodice, and then the 1 outer fashion layer. So now that it's all cut out, I can finally start assembling it, and you may have noticed this. I have crazily decided to assemble this dress using an 1880s treadle sewing machine that is in complete working order. My parents bought this quite a few years ago, and I have sewed a few projects on it, and you also would have seen it in my perspective video, but it is in complete working order, and it is beautiful and it's so fun to use, so I decided why not? So I guess I'm kind of mixing the 18th century, Grace Kelly era, like 1950s, and 1880s sewing machine, because all of that comes together, right? Let's get on with this process and see how much I can get done in the next few hours. The first step was to set up this 1880s treadle sewing machine, and let me tell you, I love working with this machine and really hope to do a lot of other projects with it. So I did a quick test on the stitches to make sure it was sewing well. Surprisingly, it sewed on the sheer fabric very well. But I did have to adjust the stitches, which you can actually do on this machine, which is so neat. I mean, 1880s and you could change the stitch length. It's incredible, this machine. Behold, the most ugly, not matching scissors stored in the drawer. So now I can go on and sew the bodice pieces together. And for some reason, I started out with this first sheer layer. I go on to the other parts of the bodice. After this, I just did one piece of sheer for I have no idea why. But anyways, this machine is really perfect. But it does have this one thing where you have to lock the stitches out because it's a chain stitch. And that can be a little bit troublesome because if you pull on it, it comes all apart, the whole seam. But as long as you lock it, it's good to go. Now I'm moving on to the under bodice. So I first basted together the cotton layer and the voile layer. I'm making sure that the outer layer, which is the basic cotton, is a little bit larger than the voile layer because that's how it fits around your body. That inside layer is just going to be a tad smaller than the outer layer. And so after I got that pinned in place, I did a very quick basting stitch to secure it in place. And here you can see I kind of have it wrapped around my seam roll, and this is just to keep that placement of the outer layer being slightly larger than that inner voile layer. And now we're moving on to the darts. So I was able to match up my traced lines and basting stitches, get that pinned in place, and then sew. And I do know that you are supposed to sew darts from the top to the bottom, not like how I'm doing it here. Now, I decided not to do that because simply I was lazy and I didn't want to repin my things to make the pins go the right direction, so I just sewed it incorrectly because I'm like that. And now, as I mentioned, you do have to lock the stitches of this sewing machine. But after I locked it, I also did some quick stitches with the end of the thread to make sure it wouldn't come out, because that would be awful. And then we can remove the basting stitches, which is the most satisfying thing ever, I think. This is the progress I made thus far. It fits really well, and I'm happy to move on to the boning channels and the outer fashion layer. So I just used twill tape for my boning channels, and I just stitched it straight on to the underbodice because the outer sheer layer will cover up all those stitches. For the top edge of this underbodice, I folded it over about a ½ inch and got it sewed in place. Again, the outer sheer layer is going to cover all these stitches up, so no need for invisible hand sewing. Before I go on and sew the two side seams, I did add some boning channels to each side of that side seam. I decided to place a lot of my boning channels right on top of some darts, and to reduce some of the bulk, I decided to just grab my pinking shears and get rid of that extra bulk. I did want a structured underbodice, and that is why I decided to bone it. I am using synthetic whalebone for this. Now the next part is the fun part of draping the back pattern piece. Here I just made 3 pleats along each side of the back, so 6 total. I decided to add this detail because it is very 18th century and I really like this aspect of 18th century fashion. So of course I wanted to incorporate this into this dress. And then before I went and sewed, I decided to give it a quick iron to make sure all those folds were securely folded and in place before I sewed. So I did decide to top stitch these pleats in place. I thought about trying to repin them so I can sew them, like a regular seam, but I decided that was just too much of a challenge, and really I liked the look of the top stitch. So I decided, why not? Next step is to attach the outer fashion layer to the under bodice pieces. So I just did a quick stitch along the edge to secure the fashion layer to that under bodice layer. And now we can finally move on to the side seams. I did want to sew all these layers all at once at the side seam. This would allow for some adjustments, but also just to secure everything in place. Well, I decided to do it this way. And then a quick sew of the shoulder seams. Alright, so it's about 8:30 and the bodice is somewhat done. It's not quite there. I've got some hand sewing to do still on it. And then of course there's the full skirt. So definitely a little bit later than I was thinking I would get to this stage. But I'm gonna go spend the evening watching some shows with my family while I do that hand sewing on the bodice. And hopefully by around 10ish, probably more like 11, I'll come back in here and the bodice will be basically done. And then I'll be able to work on the skirt for the rest of the late evening. We shall see though. It might end up being a 2-day project. We're just gonna play it by ear. So far, I'm pretty happy with it's turning out, so that's good. Whether it takes as short as I was wanting to take or not, it's gonna be a nice dress. So anyways, I will see you late tonight if I decide to do that. I don't know yet. I'm tired. Behold the most satisfying feeling of tearing fabric. All the pieces to all 3 skirts of this dress are just rectangle pieces, and I decided to attach them together with French seams. I've mentioned this in other videos, but pressing a seam open before turning it makes the turning much easier and really gives you a much flatter, crisper edge. Since the skirt pieces are all straight grain and completely straight for as long as you can see, the hem was so very easy, and it made me very happy that this was the case. And then my absolute favorite technique of all time, fork pleats. So easy, so smart, and I love it. Since the back of the bodice has a point, I wanted to make sure the pleats were smooth all the way down that point, because that's where it's going to be sewn to the bodice. And again, fork pleats are incredible. I will be coming out with a tutorial soon about this, and I will link it when it's posted. And attaching the skirt to this outer bodice was so fun, but also again I decided to do a top stitch to connect them both.
I don't know if that was smart or not, but again, I liked the look of the top stitching, so why not make it easy on myself? Moving on to the underskirt. So this is just a basic cotton lawn that I'm using for the underskirt. Because my underskirt is a sheer fabric, I needed this other layer underneath it.
So it is 2 a.m. and I am very tired. And the dress is not finished, unfortunately. It makes me a little sad not being able to meet that challenge. But on the same hand, I am so happy with what this dress is turning into. And I really got quite a lot done. The understructure and the main bodice took a lot of work to get right and to get the details in that I wanted to get in. So overall, I am very happy with it. I haven't decided yet if I want to put sleeves on it or leave it sleeveless. So I'm kind of waiting off on that. And no, I did not meet the challenge, but I will finish it tomorrow. And you guys can probably tell I am so tired. I'm very tired. That's why I'm gonna go to bed. It's really fun to design and create. I've never really done something like this before, like mesh it up and stuff. Yeah, my words are not coming to me right now. So I will see you tomorrow when I finish this dress. So. So day number 2. So that means that this did not take 1 day to make, but that's okay. As my mom said, this dress is too pretty not to spend time on. So I am okay with the fact that I am spending more time on this because in the end, I'll have a better result of a dress. So that's okay. And I'm hoping to finish it today. I probably should finish it today because I don't see why I couldn't. But I do apologize for last night. That was quite the update. I think I was half asleep. But today I'm much more energized. I've got coffee and I got sleep, so we can finish this. So one of the things I was trying to decide if I wanted to do or not was add sleeves. And I'm still a little bit torn, but I think I've landed on cap sleeves. That way I don't have to worry about fitting them. But I also generally tend to wear things that have sleeves versus no sleeves. Just kind of a preference, even though I do like wearing some no sleeves. So it's kind of like either way. But I think I decided on cap sleeves, kind of like this. This is just laid on here. Anyways, now we're gonna get started on today's part of this dress.
So here's a tip for cutting fabric on the straight grain that you can't tear. So grab one of the threads and pull on it and basically slightly gather it, not too much, just enough to have a distinct line for you to cut. Cut this all the way across and there you have it. Again, I sewed this layer of the fabric with French seams, and this is the underskirt, not to be confused with the underskirt. More fork pleats because, as I said, I love them, and I really do prefer pleats over gathers pretty much anytime unless it achieves a desired result. So again, just fork pleats, and I will have a tutorial coming out soon for you guys. By the way, this is pleating the underskirt. After I got those pleats all sewn in place, I went on and attached my waistband to this underskirt. I did want it separate from the actual dress. I decided I might not always want this extra fluff to the dress, so I decided having a separate skirt to add more fluff when I wanted it was probably the smart way to go. I just used 2 pieces of 1-inch twill tape sandwiched together to make the waistband for this skirt. And now for the underskirt. So underskirt, not underskirt. I gathered that front section, which will be the visible part of the underskirt, and then I bound it with some twill tape. I also gathered the rest of this skirt, I just didn't catch it on camera. So for the bodice, I decided to go ahead and do the front closure, which is hooks and eyes. I prefer a buttonhole stitch to secure these in place. And then I usually do thread bars instead of the metal bars that usually come with hooks and eyes. I just make a couple stitches of the thread, and then I bind these stitches, so to speak, with buttonhole stitches. Again, I did some hand sewing while we watched a show in the living room, so I did not film the entire process. I'm attaching the underskirt to the bodice. Yes, there was a day 3 to this project. Finally, the time came to attach these sleeves that I wanted to add. It took quite some time drafting the sleeves and making them look good, but in the end, I did achieve a cute little cap sleeve. And here's one thing I kept forgetting about, the lining. I have not attached that yet. So before I did, I wanted to make sure all the seams were securely in place. Once all the seams were in place, then I could go and attach the lining. I am using a fell stitch to secure this lining in place, and it is a lot of hand sewing to get done, but it's so worth it. And this, my friends, is actually the final step for this project that, as you know, did not take one day to make.
So that concludes this one day make challenge, which, as you know, did not take one day. But there are a few things that I learned along the process that I hope to take into my future sewing. Just really the pros for accepting the one day challenge thing. If you maybe are considering doing it yourself or have done it in the past and felt discouraged when you didn't finish it in one day. At first, I was kind of discouraged for not finishing it in one day, but when looking back, I really appreciated the fact that I chose to do it, and even though it didn't take one day, I was able to get so much in on that first day of making this dress. I would have never, ever been able to get that much done in one day if I had not challenged myself. So that's what's so good about a challenge, is it's challenging and you learn and grow in the process. Now, of course, you don't want to push yourself too far, but I definitely felt so good after that one day knowing how much I had gotten done. I totally noticed on the second day, I was working at such a slow pace. Like, I know for sure that I would have finished the whole dress in that second day if I had the same motivation and push to get it done on that second day. But my thinking was, well, I failed the one day challenge, so I'm just gonna mosey along and finish it. And in some regards, that's totally fine. You do you, and I do that all the time, do slow projects, and that's totally okay. But to see that change in motivation and really energy just because of that challenge. And I think that's really good. And I hope to do this again in the future. I will probably not finish it in one day. And maybe I'll make myself a 2-day challenge just so maybe I can succeed at that. But just pushing that one day to get so much done is just really good. It's energizing to know that you can do that fast, because sometimes when you're on a project that takes several months to complete, it can get kind of discouraging and you kind of start questioning, like sewing skills, just what you're doing in life. It's just like that drawn on project can bring on those feelings. And so this one day make challenge just help energize that. And yes, you can do this. You can do it quickly if you want to, but it's also okay to go slow. So anyways, that's what I took out from this one day challenge. As I said, I was so slow on the second day, but that was okay. And it's finished now, and it only took 3 days. 3 days to make something is a miracle for me. Usually it's months and hundreds of hours. So that was really fun. Anyways, I think that kind of wraps up my feelings for this one day make challenge. If you decide to accept the challenge and make your own project, whatever it may be, in one day, let me know in the comments. And what do you think of this era mashup combination? It's the first time I've ever done anything like this before, and I really had so much fun. It's a fun dress, and it's totally comfortable. Yes, it has boning in it, but that does not affect the comfort. It is very comfortable. So anyways, let me know what you think of this era mashup. Should I do more of these type of things? That could be in the future, I don't know. Also, I filmed the whole process of doing my hair and makeup, which, yes, I darkened my eyebrows, you might have noticed. I hardly do that. So I filmed the whole process, and I'm thinking about doing kind of a time-lapse / tutorial for that process. I'm say tutorial because I really didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of threw it up and see how it worked out. So it wouldn't be like, this is how to look like Grace Kelly, because I don't think I look like Grace Kelly right now. Anyways, if you are interested in seeing that video, let me know in the comments. I'm still not sure if I'm gonna take the time to edit that and put it out, but let me know if you're interested or not, and that will help me decide. So I think that wraps up this one day challenge. Thanks again, Carolee Cosplay, for recommending this or challenging us to it, whichever you want to call it. Be sure to leave a comment a like, and if you aren't already, give that red subscribe button a click, because I post every Friday and I have some fun, exciting projects coming to you very soon. And now go out into your own sewing area and learn, create, and inspire.